Hello, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, depending where you are in this world. Welcome to Connect Africa. So, for today, our topic is we have been saying about this. So, today is the day on Aliko Dangote and, in general, the oil industry in Nigeria, which can be also reflected in other countries in the continent. Welcome, Kwame.
Thank you, Mahlet. Greetings to everyone who's watching us today. Uh, we are reaching you out. We are reaching out to you from Connect Africa. We appreciate you for the fact that you support the channel and you always turn up to listen to us and of course to share. Many of you have been sharing in the comment section, reflecting on the topic of the day. And as today, Mahlet has mentioned, we want to reflect on Dangote's comments. Recently, the president or the CEO or chairman of the Dangote Industries has made some comments, and this has been repeated on a couple of occasions. Recently, when he was in Bahamas, where the Africa Import and Export Bank held its annual meetings, and earlier on, when he was in Kigali, Rwanda, at the Africa CEO Summit, which was hosted by President Kagame. So he made some comments, and it is those comments which we are going to reflect on the challenges he faced during the building of the refinery and other challenges that he talked about. So these are the things that we will be reflecting on today and see where is Africa going now. Is it, are we in the right direction as the African continent? Because this is the richest man or richest black man on the planet, and the things he's saying about our continent really requires us to reflect and move in a different direction, as it shows that we are really not, walking the right walk when it comes to industrialization on the African continent.
Yeah, so back to me, I guess, as Kwame said, it is his comment, or rather, revelation in this conference in the Bahamas, at the Afri Exim Bank. It was an annual meeting, so where basically he said that, or he revealed local and foreign mafia tried several times to sabotage his 19 billion refinery. They almost prevented it to be, present, or to reach to the final line. So now Dangote made this revelation, of course, in this conference, and earlier also he mentioned it during, the Kigali summit. Now, before I go to, the comments made by Aliko Dangote, Kwame, I know that you have written articles, especially when Bola Tinubu of Nigeria came to power, and kind of suggesting in which direction this government should go. The restructuring, particularly the restructuring of the oil sector, is I remember one of your recommendation, and we even came and discussed about this. So far, still Bola Tinubu is in power. He hasn't done a thing. In fact, it has gone to crisis. Now, going to Dangote's comments, now he mentions that he faced a lot of challenges, including those now who are taking the extracting and selling the refined fuel to Nigeria, especially the international oil cartels, which he called mafia, working with some elements that are based in the country itself, in Nigeria. Now, this, I believe, so my question is not for the first time this being revealed. So is this big, especially the international which he called mafias. I mean, it has been said before, but what is it special this time? Is it because it's said by Dangote, who is, as we refer to him, the richest black man in the world?
Yeah, so thank you, Mahlet. So let me just go back to my article, which I wrote a time ago when Timbu had just come to power. So I suggested that what is really needed in Nigeria, it was actually during the period in which he was removing the subsidies on fuel, because the claim during that period was that the subsidies in Nigeria are going to be or have been used by the wrong people, and therefore they are removing the fuel subsidies from the poor because there is a few rich people who have been using it, which I did not find very convincing. So my recommendation to in that article to the Nigerian government was for Tinubu to restructure the Nigerian oil industry so that the Nigerian state, the Nigerian government can own at least 60% of all the revenue, or if you are talking about the crude oil that is coming from the ground. And mind you, this suggestion was that the government was aimed at the government generating enough revenue to be able to take care of the needs of the people. If you're talking about subsidies, the problem is not the subsidies. The problem is that the government is not generating enough revenue, and the leadership of the government of the country has neglected the oil industry, and yet it is the major generator of revenue for it in whatever it does. So what was needed was renegotiation of those oil contracts, because most of the oil contracts have been unfair for the government. And if you did not restructure the oil industry in Nigeria, also what you are going to face is what Dangote is facing right now, that he wants crude to run the refinery, and these international oil companies have held onto the crude. They don't want to sell the crude to Dangote, or they want to sell him the crude at exorbitant prices. They want to sell it to the international. So in essence, what we are saying is that the international oil companies now, they own Nigeria. They own Nigeria's crude. So Nigeria doesn't own the crude. Now the international oil companies, they own the crude according to the contracts which were signed. So Dangote has to struggle, has to complain before he can get the oil, which is ridiculous. It is just ridiculous. It's unacceptable. So this brings me to the question that I'm supposed to answer on whether Dangote is the first person to comment about this. Actually, Dangote is not the first person to comment about this kind of arrangement. How the international oil companies long, during the independence period, and when we had gotten a lot of nationalistic leaders across the continent, people like Kwame Nkrumah, the Samoa Machel, and actually the fathers of Africa's independence mentioned this issue, that if we are not careful, these companies will come back to colonize us. The Western world will come back to colonize us. In the name of investment, they're going to use investment to colonize us. And Nkrumah mentioned this in his book, Class Struggle in Africa. He mentioned it clearly. And even Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, which was again written by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, he pointed out clearly these problems, that these companies, these multinational companies, are going to come back here and claim that they are investing, because that is how they came to Nigeria. And when they come, if you are not careful and you don't know how to sign these contracts, you don't know how to handle these contracts, you don't know how to go about the situation with these companies, then they are going to colonize you, and they're going to take over the resources of your country, and you will not have any control of it. So this is the cry that we are hearing Dangote, put up. These are the cries that we are hearing from Dangote, in Kigali, at the CEO summit, the African CEO summit in Kigali, and then at the Afrexim annual meetings, which happened in Bahamas. Of course, some people ask, why did the Afrexim annual meetings happen in Bahamas? It is because the Afrexim is trying to extend its tentacles to include all people of African descent. So that is why it went to Bahamas. So it goes all the way, it moves across the continent and then goes to the African diaspora, which is a very good move, of course. But to go back to the point that we are discussing, many of the credible leaders in Africa who are the fathers of African independence spoke about this phenomenon. And what Nkrumah suggested could be the solution to these problems that we are facing, that these corporations come and take over our countries and take over our resources, was the unification of Africa so that we can plan together for our resources. And of course, unfortunately, many of the African leaders did not listen to Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. So when we talk about Pan-Africanism, this is what we are fighting for. This is the practical thing that we are fighting for: the unification of Africa so that the resources can be controlled by us, the Africans. And this will help. This will help actually the African continent itself and its people going forward. That we should have control over our resources. If you look at Botswana itself, Botswana, which is considered actually one of the most success, is a success story out of the African continent because of the way it has handled its diamonds. Even itself, it was earning before President Masisi, came to power in Botswana. Botswana also was earning below 10% of the revenue that is coming out of its diamonds. And what we are seeing is that President Masisi also has come up very strong to fight against the beer until they increased the share of diamond, I think, to 20% right now. And he said that they have to increase it every year until Botswana, you know, owns about more than 50% of the diamonds. Every year is going to increase, and Botswana has to be involved in every step, whether it is mining, whether it is processing those diamonds. Botswana is going to be involved in each of these stages. So these are the restructuring actually I was talking about in the Nigerian oil sector, that Nigeria has to own up to 60%. Nigeria should be able to own up to 60%. The contracts should be renegotiated, just like what Botswana has done, even though we have been saying that Botswana is a success story. But President Masisi, when he came, he did not see this as a success. It was not a success. So what we are seeing in Nigeria is the opposite, that the leaders have refused to take care of the responsibilities. They are not taking their responsibilities seriously. They just leave everything the way it is so that these corporations can continue to extract, they can continue to exploit the people, they can continue to steal from the people. And what is the results? The results is to fight against, an enterprise that is going to help the country. So now the international oil companies are now fighting against Dangote seriously. But this talk which Dangote is bringing, or these comments, or this fight he's engaged in, it did not start today. It did not start today. Our forefathers, Pan-African forefathers, have been warning us about this. We were warned about this. So I think that now it is up to the next generation, as we are seeing things going in Kenya. It is up to the next generation, which is our generation, to take that fight on and see where we'll take it, how far we'll go with it in defeating these corporations going forward.
So, do you think that this is a phenomena that kind of prevented the continent from going to the industrialization era, where Africa finds itself struggling? For example, if we go back to those Pan-African leaders, the first independence, the one who laid the struggle against colonization, there was, that time kind of countries went fast forward in terms of having manufacturing companies in their country. So do you think this phenomena, I refer to the West, the colonizers working together with our people, because we always take part in our own demise, unfortunately. Is that what is preventing for Africa from going to industrialization?
Absolutely. So it's a combination of factors. So if you examine Nkrumah's work, class struggle in Africa. Actually, he wrote that book when he was in Guinea, later on after he had been removed from presidency. So it was his observations of the forces, the entangled forces. So if you look at Nkrumah, he's someone who struggled, who tried to analyze African society and the problems, the intervening forces in the continent, because he was interested in solving Africa's problems, all Africa's problems. So he struggled with understanding though the forces at play, because before you have understood the forces at play, you cannot start solving those problems. So one of the things he recognized is that the neo-colonial forces were overwhelming. All right, they were overwhelming, and then he saw also the internal forces, that internally we have a group of people who are working with the external aggressors, the external forces. And as you have said, that we always sometimes play a part in our own demise. And of course, we have seen this, in many of the people who have overthrown good leaders, that they were sometimes they were their friends and stuff like that. So Nkrumah saw this. He outright saw this, and it goes all the way back to that independence period. That in 1960s we got nationalistic leaders. A lot of industries were put up. A lot of industries were put up, and the West did not like this, because for them, our countries, the continent of Africa, is a source of raw materials for their industry. That is number one. Number two, this continent and our population is a source of market for their products. So they just want to come and extract the raw materials from the continent. And of course, also the labor, they want to extract the labor, as you have seen that these days they advertise to take out the best of the some of the smart people on the continent. All those smart people, that they are bright in science, mathematics and stuff like that. They normally extract them and take them. And the market. So they want to manufacture the products from our own material resources and bring them. Now, when you industrialize your country, then you are not going to buy products from them. And at the same time, they are not going to have the resources to, to run their country. And if you look at countries like Europe, European countries, you look at continents like Europe, it's a very small continent. And that is why they came out and went to the US, went to Australia to conquer those lands, because the place is small and it doesn't have resources. It doesn't have resources. So the only way for them to survive is to depend on others' resources. And we have seen this with France, that France, when it was sacked from Niger, Mali, Burkina, it doesn't want to go. And it doesn't want to go not because it loves you. It is because you are taking the resources from it. You are going to deny the resources from it. And we saw this with the Niger government recently, that it took over the uranium mines, which belong to a French company. So this is the scenario that we are faced, which is very difficult. That when you go back to the 60s, you see a deliberate struggle to remove leaders who had industrialized Africa. Africa by 1970 had captured about 7% of global manufacturing. 70%. When you're talking about international industrialization, Africa had 7% output of the international industrialization. When you go today, we are less than 4%. Why? The IMF came in there to intervene, to stop or to slow down the process of modernization of African economy, and industries were destroyed. So these are the problems now which we are facing. That what they did way back in the 1960s and the 70s with the IMF intervention, where they say privatize, don't run with. Yet during that period, the only people, or the only group which had or what was going to be the only source of income for us to be able to participate in these big industries was the state. We did not have entrepreneurs. Our private sector was non-existent during that period. Even today,
But
even though
on that note, that's really good, because I want you to elaborate on that point. The other thing that we need to raise is we need a clarity, because the so-called international institution comes and advise our governments to go to in the West, include the government, the government of the West, and then the so-called financial institutions, which you one mentioned, IMF and World Bank, advise these African leaders to sell their entity or the company to private sectors, and they have built this image of private sector as the only credible one. But yet we have also national companies which are owned by the state, like Ethiopian Airlines, which are doing very well. So it's not only the government. By the way, I have heard people also, like ordinary citizens like me, really supporting the private sector than state-owned company. So please reflect on that.
So so what we want to be clear here is that we are not indicting that the private sector doesn't have a role to play in in the organization of a country. The private sector has a very big role. It's supposed to be the biggest. But what we want to distinguish here is strength, having the direction, giving direction, and then playing a major role. They are the two things. You have spearheading, you have the process of spearheading the direction of the country, and then you have the role playing a major role. So there are two things: playing a major role and then spearheading the direction. These are two things which are different. So these two things are normally confused. Who's supposed to give direction to where the country is supposed to go, and then playing a major role in the direction of where the country is going. Playing a major role, it is definitely a state which is supposed to play a role. Okay? Even when we look at the successful state enterprises like in Africa, and one of those being Ethiopian Airlines, they are given quotas on what to achieve by the state. But even the support is given by the state. All right. If you are talking about negotiating, for example, for landing rights in particular countries, is the state, the Ethiopian state, which does that. All right. So during the emergence of African countries into independence, that is what the state was mandated to do. That is what the state was doing, that it was giving direction to the country. The state in all ways, or in all scenarios, is the one which is supposed to give direction to the country and where it is supposed to go, whether you're talking about industrial policy, whether you're talking about economic policy. That is why you find that even the people who are proponents of the private sector, they also want to run the state. You see, so it is different having or being the entity which gives direction to the country and the entity which plays a major role in the direction of the country. So the private sector is definitely supposed to play a huge role, because you want people to generate wealth at the individual level, which is very important. You want people to generate wealth. But who gives the direction of that generation of wealth? It is the state. And for our case as Africans, when we emerged as independent states, we do not have any direction. We do not have any capacity. Our private sector was nailed there. It was non-existent. We were supposed to be directed by the state where to go. And the state actually was supposed to build the capacity and then build the wealth among the people. That is why in the Nkrumah published the seventh year development plan in 1965. And even in New York Times, they said that Ghana's economy is going to be a mixed economy. That plan, the 7-year development plan of Nkrumah, Ghana was supposed to be a mixed economy with the state and the private sector working together. And that's what also China has done. If you go to China, this is what China is doing. All right. The state first built up the capacity, and then it gave power to the private sector so that the private sector can generate more wealth. And the state kept empowering it by building the best infrastructure, electricity, communication, roads, putting medicine in the hospitals, building more hospitals and putting medicine there so that people can be healthy to carry out business. And in the United States too, is the same thing, that we see that this country originally, as the United States, was built using the power of the state. All these laws, of slavery, which gave white people, free labor for them to carry out enterprises. This was the state. The Jim Crow laws, which put black people at the disposal as labor, which is disposed to the white people to use free labor and cheap labor. It was the state. The the interstate highways in the United States. It was the state building the railway, intercontinental railway network in the United States. It was the state. All right. Today, we are talking about the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the new industrial policy which is being championed by Biden under the guardianship or the architect, who I call the architect of this industrial policy, who is called Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor of the Biden administration. It is the state. They are using the state, dispensing out more than 60 billion, 40 billion, to the chips and industrial sector, and then to the renewable energy sector. It is the state. So there is this brainwashing that is being pushed in Africa, and therefore, as you said, we see our intellectuals even jump on this bandwagon and start saying private sector, private sector. But in reality, what is going on in the West is different. It's different. These people are carrying out a mixed economy. But when they come here, they deny us the fact that we should be a mixed economy, whereby the state has a major role to play. And you see it happening here, that you go to countries like Ghana, the government has the power, has enough resources to establish a gold refining plant, but they don't do it. They don't do it. I mean, if you go to China to buy equipment for refining gold, you want to establish a plant, you should be able to do it. The government has the money to do it, but they don't do it. So of course this becomes pathetic and unfortunate. But then,
as cliche as the question might seem, why they don't do it? Because they are going to be banned if they are going to do it. It's dangerous, or simply they don't want to develop. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it needs to be answered.
I think that this question can be answered by what Nkrumah repeatedly said. If you are alone as a small country, you cannot fight against this cartel of companies. Like right now, what Dangote is facing resistance from a cartel of countries, a cartel of companies, international oil companies, who he called it that they are stronger than, these are the words which Dangote used, that they are stronger than the mafias, the drug mafias, the people who are who are selling drugs. He said that these international oil companies, they are stronger than the mafias on the of the drugs. So this is the word which he used, and this is the same thing which Nkrumah was saying, that however big Nigeria is as a country with a huge population, is the biggest population, it has the biggest population on the continent. You do not have enough power to compete. Look, Chevron, Royal Dutch Shell, you are talking about British Petroleum, you are talking about Total Energies. These are companies each with over $200 billion. It's just a company in capitalization, market capitalization. So they can do anything they want in any country. All right. So if you combine all these companies, they have more than a trillion, more than trillion or $2 trillion in market capitalization, all of them combined. So you, Dangote, you just have about $30 billion net worth or $20 billion net worth. You can't fight against somebody who has over 2 trillion or $1 trillion, or even one company of them, Shell, which has more than $200 billion. So this is where it becomes very difficult. Now you need your state, but now the state of Nigeria or any African country is indebted to the International Monetary Fund, and the International Monetary Fund is a brother to these international oil companies, because they are the ones who are putting money in the International Monetary Fund. So now this becomes a big problem that you cannot fight back. So you see that whatever they tell you, you have to do. So unless then you have very creative leaders, you have very crafty leaders. You see, you have to have very crafty and intelligent leaders and fearless leaders, then they can be able to take on these challenges without begging and then without hesitating. So this is the challenge that we are facing, why the leaders cannot do it. So then this in this, that is why Nkrumah prescribed unifying the continent. Unify and be powerful. You don't have any other option. You have to unify and be powerful. Then you will have the strength to fight back. But if you are small in your small countries, then you cannot fight these countries. You cannot fight these companies. You don't have the strength. You don't have enough strength to fight this kind of money which they have, these people, and the backing of Pentagon. They have the backing of Pentagon and
Mhm.
the United States Department, so they are working together. And this is what people should not discount. These people are working together, so it is so powerful. The coalition is so powerful that as a
Okay.
small country, you cannot fight it alone.
Perhaps quickly, if you can comment, Biden's tariff on China, maybe it will help us also more to understand that we have a
So,
lot.
so Biden is tariffs on China. For example, China's automobile industry, of course, also goes on to show us the importance of the state, all right, and not the private sector. Because look, the American private sector now cannot stand the heat, or they cannot stand the competition in the Chinese market, in the Chinese automobile market. Now, what have they done? Because they cannot compete over there, they run to their state. They run to the American state to protect them. Now, America and the Biden administration came out to protect its private sector within the United States by imposing tariffs on the Chinese automobile industry because its companies cannot compete, which is the opposite in African countries here. The state does not, in Africa here, is very difficult to see a country or a government which is protecting its corporations or its company, the local industries. It's very difficult to see it. So now the Biden administration decided to put 100% on the Chinese automobile industry to protect Ford, to protect General Motors, to protect Tesla, because they are fearful that China is coming in a major way. So this again shows us that it is the government of Nigeria which is supposed to protect Dangote, because this is our industry. The Dangote refinery, the Dangote and all his industry, Dangote Industries is our company, is our African company. So without hesitating, the Nigerian state is supposed to come out and protect Dangote. It has to do it by all means necessary, without hesitating at all. But you see that it is now hesitating. It is now giving lukewarm statements, muted statements, which are not clear whether it is doing. So this is the fear that they are fearing, these international oil companies, and of course it is worrying and it is a problem. But I think that the Nigerian people, they have to stand up and put a lot of pressure on this, or even the whole African continent has to stand up and put a lot of pressure. Otherwise, all our industries are going to collapse, because that is how they collapsed them.
Interesting. There is a lot, and we have also a lot of questions today. We are here for long, so stay tuned, our audience. Thank you. I mean, the comment section is going really hot. I'm gonna read some in the middle, but one interesting thing, the Juma Botik, who said that these cartels, some of them are actually former retired militaries. Now, I don't want us to go there, meaning later on maybe we'll give it a part. Now, still on the comment of Dangote. Now, another thing is Kwame, what he mentioned in his revelation, I would rather call it, very passionately, that he has been doing in so many occasions, in the Afrexim Bank, in the Caribbean, also in Africa, in Kigali, the issue of local investors versus foreign investors. Now, this is what we call this FDIs, the foreign direct investors. Now, he said this, it is Africans who will invest and develop the continent. It's not foreign investors. So now, why do we see our heads of states with all their entourage hopping on their private jet from summit to summit, and wasting people's tax from what they take from the poor people in the name of looking for a foreign direct investment, and that is by jeopardizing at the expense of the local business. Now, these foreign businesses are given tax exemption, or sometimes, as you call it, tax holidays, sometimes up to 10 years, while you suck the blood of your own people at home, which is a local investor. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, so yes, that's one of the things which he mentioned, that uh, I mean, this is something which the many Pan-Africans have said, even Nkrumah, Walter Rodney, and all others. So it seems that to a certain extent, the Pan-African voice is drowned out. And this is a strategy of imperialism to do this, that our voices are in many cases drowned out. What we say is disregarded as not important, because Pan-Africans have been saying that let us use our resources, the resources which we have. In fact, Dangote says that it is the local success. If you have success locally, is when the foreign direct investment is attracted to your country. All right, you organize yourself, and this is what China did. This is what Singapore did. This is what Korea did. All these countries, including Japan, this is what they did. But now, what we see is that our heads of state in Africa, they make it as if foreign direct investment is the primary development tool for the country. All right. So this is what they have employed as their strategy. And as you mentioned, they go out all over the world saying that they are going to attract, foreign direct investment. You hear, EU Africa Summit, US Africa Summit, Japan Africa Summit, Turkey Africa Summit, India Africa Summit. All these are enterprises which are aimed to attract foreign direct investment. And this is what Dangote is saying. He's saying that what is going to develop our continent, Africa, is not foreign direct investment per se without local investors. It's the local investors who are going to do this. And you look at people like President Museveni, they are the ones who have been moving in this kind of thing. People like Akufo-Addo, and all of them, including the Ramaphosas, all of them, almost all of them, the African leaders, that's what they have been doing. That they put foreign direct investment before the local investors, the local businesses who are in the country. They are not given tax holidays. The foreigners, when they come in, they give them tax holidays, 10 years. All right. And I think that this stems from miseducation. I think there's a book which was written by Carter G. Woodson, one of the Africans in the United States, who said that the Negro has been miseducated. They give him the wrong thing, and he's not paying attention to what the people who are educating him are doing. All right. So look, they tell you in your school, they tell you that the private sector is all there is. So this comes all the way from education. And if you look at all the leaders in our country, the people, the heads of states in our country, you see that all of them are mentioning sustainable development goal, sustainable development goal. But there's no such thing as sustainable development goals on which a country should be built. Millennium development goals, a private sector. So they take these catchphrases from the West and Western publications and education systems and seminars, and they come and pound it and they pump it across the African continent, which are not true. So I think that there is a need for the intellectuals on the continent themselves to decolonize themselves. They have to accept that we have to have a new way of developing. And I think that this is what Dangote is trying to point out. He's trying to point out not only to the ruling class on the African continent that you have to change direction in how you guys are governing the country, but you have to change your narrative. So he's pointing out to the ruling class in Africa, and also the intellectuals on our continent, because they themselves have been misleading. You go to classes to learn, and this is what they are pounding out. They are pumping out private sector, sustainable development goals, this and that. And yet there's no country which has developed on all these things that they are pounding out. So I think that this is what Dangote is trying to point out, that it is the state which is supposed to lead, protect your industries, but at the same time, pay attention to your local investors. It is your people who are going to develop the country. It's not the foreigners. It's not the foreign direct investment. Stop going around and saying that you are looking for foreign direct investment, foreign investors to come and develop your country. They are not going to develop your country. These people are coming to extract, to steal, to take from you. That is what they are coming to do. They're not coming to develop your country. Invest in your people, invest in your own industries, invest in your own banks, invest in your own manufacturing, invest in your own financial institutions, invest in your own processing instead of waiting for foreign direct investment. So I think that this is what Dangote is trying to point out for us.
Uh, Very good. Thank you, Kwame. I think on that note, I just want to add, from experience as an Ethiopian, I remember talking about this FDI, like foreign direct investment, and there were a lot of foreigners coming, some of them kicked out from Kenya, like those flour exporters from Europe, from Israel, and other countries, and also others, not only the flour business. They tell you one of the reasons that the government need is that because they want the foreign currencies, they think whatever, whether it's a 30% or 40% upfront capital they bring is not really cash. Actually, whether it's 30% or whatever, it comes in kind. They just bring the equipment and that's it. There is no cash they are going to deposit in the country. So I really heard this directly from one of the investors and how governments are so obsessed. He's a foreigner, but he was just revealing. I just wanted to add that one.
So the other thing they do on that is that if these companies are given a tax holiday in Kenya, for example, of 10 years, they will ask for a tax holiday of 10 years and they will promise that they will invest maybe $1 billion, right? So even before that period is finished,
they run away.
They run away and they go to Ethiopia.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they give them another tax holiday over there.
Yeah.
And these governments are not prepared. They don't have enough. They're not strategic enough to handle this and communicate with the government in Kenya and say, okay, so these guys are coming here. They are saying we should do this. How have you dealt with them? They don't communicate. Our governments don't communicate with each other to understand what these guys are doing. And this is what Nkrumah said, that the African countries are not sophisticated enough to understand how to deal with these corporations. This is what Nkrumah was saying. And the only way for us to deal with them is to unify the continent so that they cannot run from one country to another. Because you always catch them. You always know what they're about. And this is what we are pushing for, the unification of the African continent.
Yeah, this is really, our people here. It's really a big topic. It kind of pulls that thread and it unfolds a lot of things in a lot of areas. These cartels and the mafias collaborating, with the West and sabotaging their own country. Now, why do I say is that, Kwame, you, for example, Africa's railway industry has lagged behind. We can mention from the 1963 when the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, was established by our ancestors. There was this Cape to Cairo. Even now the foreigners laugh at us that this has not been materialized for more than 60 years. In any case, now it has lagged behind the rest of the world since independence. Okay, now you mentioned that in various occasions this actually relates to the oil industry. Now, what I want you to do is that, can you please tell us, to our viewers, why you think there is a deliberate conspiracy to sabotage the African continent, now that we have a big man, Dangote, speaking about it?
Yeah, so when I was doing my research, because I've worked in the railway industry before, I was just looking for information which tells me why don't we have rail in on the African continent? Because I have a project which I have proposed to the Africa Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and I've gone there to present that project to them, that we should build a railway platform across the African continent, and it's a platform which would cost us 100 to 150 billion dollars. All right, so the project is called the Africa Railway Triangle Network Master Plan. Now, I was researching into why we don't have rail.
Allow me to say that just on the Africa Railway Triangle. Say that again.
network. African, it is called the African Railway Triangle Network Master Plan.
My people know that this is Kwame's original, his own, written by him and everything. This is a big one. Sometime we did it before, but you really have to come in. It's a big time. Anyway, go on. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was researching in this, that's when I saw that we don't have a railway platform across the continent, and there's a paper which was written by one lady on Africa's financing, Chinese financing of Africa's rail, and we saw that the World Bank had stopped financing rail in Africa. Now, because for long I've suspected the oil industry, I went to search: is there a relationship between the World Bank's financing of Africa's railway industry and the oil industry? So I realized that Africa's oil industry, Africa consumes about $300 billion of oil, every day on the continent. All right, with the South Africa and Egypt and Nigeria being the biggest consumers. Okay, and what I realized is that most of sub-Saharan Africa, the companies which are dominating the oil industry, it is Shell and Total. All right. In certain cases, if you go to places like Kenya, the East African part, these oil companies actually even sometimes rename themselves. They give themselves different names to appear that they are different. And I tracked to see, yes, so I tracked to see, and I saw that these companies are dominating the railway industry. And what we found is that the rail doesn't lead to a consumption of a lot of oil. If you are using rail, you save a lot because the consumption is very low. All right. If you are moving goods, for example, from Mombasa to Kigali, all right, because Rwanda is a landlocked country, or the eastern part of Congo, which should be served by the Mombasa port, you use huge amounts of fuel, all right, with trucking, because you have to have a lot of trucks. Now, the person who's controlling the supply of petroleum products in that region is going to make huge profits. But if you put it on rail, if you are using railway, then you don't consume a lot of fuel. You consume very small compared to when you are using. So, and the companies which are dominating this, they are Western companies, all of them. All right. In East Africa, Shell renamed itself and it calls itself Vivo Energy. All right. So you go to Total, you go to all these countries, and also I saw that when Uganda was attempting to build an oil refinery, that these companies, they said that they said that they should not build an oil refinery in Uganda, in Western Uganda, that the oil refinery will not be profitable. So the president in that area said that we have to build an oil refinery. If we cannot build an oil refinery, we cannot take oil out of the ground. You will not take out of the oil of the out of the ground. You will not take oil out of the ground. And who was advising in this kind of manner that we should not build an oil refinery? It is Shell. Shell, I mean, it was Total. It was Total who was, giving this kind of advice that we should not build an oil refinery. Now, when the Uganda government did more research, it realized actually that if we built this oil refinery in East Africa, it's going to be one of the most profitable in the world. Okay, it was going to be with an internal rate of return of 20%. It was going to be, it is actually going to be the most profitable. So the government is going ahead with the arrangements of building the oil refinery. So when I looked at that, and I saw that these companies dominate the oil industry and the marketing of OEMCs, or oil marketing companies, they dominate the African continent, and the World Bank did not pay money into the development of railway industry on the continent. And most of the railway in Africa has been built by the Chinese, have been helped by the Chinese. If you talk about the Tazam railway, which comes from Zambia all the way to Tanzania and to the Indian Ocean. If you talk about the Djibouti, Ethiopia railway, all these railway platforms were built by China. It was not built by the West. So there is a deliberate conspiracy and strategy to push Africa down and deindustrialize it, to prevent modernization and industrialization to come to Africa. And they are working together, like I said. And the best way to understand this is to read Nkrumah's book, Neo-Colonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism. Because Nkrumah elaborates very well how these corporations are operating, and they are conspiring to push us down and to continue to have us as exploited people, people who don't have anything, people who are mired in poverty, so that the European countries can continue to be on top. They have all the wealth and can continue to be on top. So they are all this is well written in Nkrumah's work. If anyone is interested in reading about it.
A very interesting revelation. I just want you, I don't know, maybe I lost connecting the dots, because today here at Connect Africa, I talked about, I was with our short briefs news that are coming, and especially, I follow the Sahel Alliance states, and Niger, because of its tension and its clash with Benin, it cannot continue now using that pipeline that is built. Niger is a landlocked country, so there is a pipeline going from Niger to the Benin's Cotonou port, which is about 2,000 kilometers. Now they have to abandon that because Benin has become openly to serve France. So, and they're sabotaging and attacking that pipeline. And now they are looking for an option again to build another pipeline to Chad. I don't know if it has a connection at all, but I was asking our viewers, to comment what is really a solution for landlocked countries like this. Now it cannot even sell its oil because it doesn't have a port, and those neighboring countries are, on and off. And Chad has also invited now again the US military back to their country. What is the trust there? What is the solution for Niger? If you can just advise on that note. I don't know even if it's related with this.
Yeah, so I think it's very difficult. It's very difficult now. It will be very difficult because if it has to build through all the way through Guinea also is not very trusted, but it's going to be very difficult.
But a railway can be a solution, or first the
Yeah,
pipeline?
so yeah, definitely the railway can be a solution if you take the oil by railway. It could be, but also the construction is a problem. So now that has to be in the framework of what we are talking about, the continental railway platform. If you build a continental railway platform, then definitely you're gonna have a solution. If you look at the map on how Niger is located, that could be now the only solution, because our railway platform actually passes through Niger also. So when it is coming from the north all the way, it passes through Niger and then it goes all the way to the port in Freetown, Sierra Leone. So definitely that would be a very good solution to solve Niger's problem in the long term. But in the short term, I think that they have to find a way of how to work with Benin to be able to take that oil to the coast.
Yeah, very sad, but I hope, it relates with.
Yeah, because the pipeline was built with the help of China. So I
Yeah,
think that China, in the first place, when they had this conflict at first, China came in and intervened, and
yeah,
they were able to calm each other down, and they were able to pump the oil through. But then Benin again was abducted or kidnapped some Nigerian citizens and called them spies. And then that's when Niger also got annoyed and said they will block off and close off the oil and stop passing it through. And of course, both Benin and Niger are losing. But I think that if the Chinese come in, and also the African Union, which is not doing its work, has to come in and intervene in these kind of situations. Especially the African Union is not doing its work. It's really not doing its work, which it's supposed to be doing. So they should be in here to be able to calm down this situation.
Thank you, Kwame. That's because one of the things we also want to, suggest solutions. So that's why. Now let's move on with our topic related to Dangote. Now, this group of mafias, Aliko Dangote came and make a big revelation, and this kind of incidents does not really end up very well. Now, should we be worried about, so to speak, Dangote's life now that he is openly speaking about these international cartels who are collaborating the West together with our own people at home. And also he's advocating for Africa's self-reliance and for governments to support their own investors at home. So in which, these are the things the continents are, the countries are importing 100%, and still where we import 62%.
Yeah, so he's been, I mean, saying a lot, and definitely as the people, I think that we have to pray for him because he's going through, tremendous challenges, huge challenges. Dangote is really, going through huge challenges. One of the things he said is that for the last 35 years, there has not been any oil refinery that has been built in sub-Saharan Africa. And again, one of the things he mentioned actually was financing. That these companies, these Western banks, IMF and World Bank, of course, starting with them, and the International Finance Corporation, they do not want to finance these businesses like oil refinery. They do not want to finance things like railway. All right. So it's because their companies are benefiting from this arrangement, and that is why he called them mafias and cartels, because they are working now again with some elements inside our countries. So if you touch their money, it is going to be a problem. It is going to be a problem. Actually, one of the things he said is that during the COVID period, the international banks, these international banks wanted the oil refinery building to fail so that they can take over the refinery. Yes, he mentioned these things at the summit. They wanted the oil refinery to fail. You see, so I mean, it's a challenge. He's going through tremendous challenge to break through. And a few days ago, the oil refinery caught fire. They had to put it out. So it's going on. Like, he's going through real challenges. The sabotaging of the refinery is real, is serious. Definitely, all of us have to pray for him. We have to pray. We have to pray for Dangote, and those who can put up a voice for him have to do it, because it's serious business. That they are dangerous people, like we said. They are dangerous people, and they are greedy. These Western people are very greedy. So it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem.
Praise one thing, but in whatever we can also to protect this kind of people is really important. It's a question also what made him to say this, what he said now. Like it seems that he's ready to say it, right? Like it's a time to say it. It has been going on, but somehow he felt this is the time to say it. So why we don't know, but we should be able to protect, advocate in whatever we can. I mean, I always say we shouldn't be that generation who says, oh, I knew this and I didn't do this while I can do it.
Yeah, definitely. And these platforms for us, they're very important because they are important for us to share this information and talk about it. Like I said, the African narrative has to be put out there. If we don't put out our narrative, and no one will. Okay, this helps us. Like we said, it helps us to conscientize our people, but it also helps us to conscientize in a sense that we can find a different way of living. We can find a different way of organizing our society as a people. There's a different way in which we can organize society. It is not only the Western way in which they are telling us that we should organize society. There's a different way of us to govern ourselves. All right. So these are things which we can continue to think about but it is a challenge. I mean, he's going through a lot of challenges, and we need to pray for him, and then we need to, as a people, support him whenever it is possible. Put pressure on African governments to support him, because this refinery is not only going to support and work for Nigeria; it's going to work for the whole African continent. And if he's well, the continent is also doing well, and there's a chance that other people will get up, like we've seen. He's in Nigeria, but he has been able to put up a cement factory in Tanzania, in Ethiopia, in all these countries, in Ghana, you see. So it helps. It helps us. So I think we need to appeal to the Nigerian government. Those ones who can write to the Nigerian government, they have to do it to increase his security. The refinery itself, there should be security on the refinery. There should be more advanced security at the refinery and all the other businesses which he owns. So I think that this is the only way, which we can contribute as a people. We talk about it. We write to the Nigerian government, whether it is the embassies where you are, the people who are in the diaspora, you write to them. I mean, the embassies in the diaspora, Nigerian embassy, or African embassies in the diaspora, you can write a letter and walk in there if you are living in the diaspora, and you say, this is what we think should be done to protect our citizen, our industrialists, in Africa, who has been suffering the aggression of these Western, international oil companies and their governments who want to sabotage Africa so that Africa does not grow. I mean, there's a lot of things which we can do. You see,
Yeah,
there's a lot
and
of things
the
which we can
Nigerian diasporas here
do.
should
Yes.
do something, and I'm sure our governments now, they want to avoid anything that look like, that quacks like what's going on in Kenya. So perhaps they will listen before something breaks out. So yeah, all Africans who live in the diaspora and also Nigerians particularly as well should do that, and do something that you would be proud of, to tell your children that you have done something. It's not just we are history in the making. So at least, okay, we come and talk about that, throwing really 1 cent or 2 cents of it, but if there's something that we can do in our capacity, we did that. I mean, during when Ethiopia was facing this media war, when there was a war in the northern part of the country, we did write letters from the Pan-African world. But yeah, that is that. But what is interesting is that why is it so much with this oil thing? Look at now Niger. These are extras. We are through with the questions that we have planned. Niger is starting that crude oil to export to China, and that would have helped the country a lot. It's a country under immense sanctions from all parts of the world, including its own neighbors. And look what they are doing, with the clash with Benin and attacking itself. They have burned some of the things. And at the end, what did they do? They just have to lock that valve of those stations of their own pipeline, the pipeline that they have hoped so much for the country and for their people. And look at Senegal also. They said, I mean, although Senegal owns it only 18%, 1/8 of it. But look at the COVID thing that is now they start to detect. Yesterday we were talking about here at Connect Africa, and then the president just attended the global vaccine forum in France, and you come and you tell us people are tested positive, and they blame it on the people coming from Mecca, and no other country have so far said anything about COVID. In
Yeah.
any case, I'm just relating it with the oil. So why so much sabotage?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's some.
Because they export it and we pay a lot of money. But what is the other things that related to this? When you have oil,
Yeah,
so
it's
much
it's
problem.
economic. It's economic. So Europe feels like it is, and the West feels like they are losing, control over the resources in these regions. So they feel that now the only way is to slow down. All right. I mean, you have seen this deliberately. United States saying deliberately that they have to slow down Chinese industrialization. All right. In broad daylight, they have said it that they have to slow down China's industrialization. So when we say that they are doing the same to Africa, it is not out of it's not because we are conspiracy theorists, but it's because these things are really happening. When they support the war in Ethiopia and all these, because Ethiopia at that time 2020 was the fastest growing economy in Africa, industrialization coming up, a lot of industries, industrial zones, is working with China. So it's not a conspiracy theory that these people are doing this, or when we say that this is true, that they are conspiring to slow down the African economy. So all these things are related and integrated, and the only way for us to fight out and be able to succeed against these kind of sabotages is for us to work together as Africans. But if we don't work together, if we don't unify the continent, the only solution is unification of Africa into a single government. Then we'll be able to defeat these people once and for all. So that is the solution. We have to go back to the solution which Nkrumah gave us, is the unification, and we have to fight as much as possible on that front. The front has to be on the unification of the African continent, and anyone who stands against the unification of the African continent, whether black or white or yellow, has to be removed from the way.
I agree. Yeah, indeed. Let's go to the comment sections. Now it has been really active hotline here in the chat section. And I will go, from bottom up. Okay. So WS Banker, United States of Africa, yeah, Zuma, the last man standing. Let me see. De Juma. The West have never been predisposed to competition. Okay, WS Banker says the West cannot fight us. They cannot outthink us, outfight us. Money is fiction, and the underlying commodity is what is important. Malema said, with Congo, South Africa could crush the dollar with diamond-backed money. Yeah, let's for the solution. To make any agreement with this Western parasites is a sin against our creator. Yeah, but in simple terms, also it is something. It's a stupidity. You do again and again the same mistake. Then you are stupid. The first time it's humanity to make a mistake, but the second, the third time you're just stupid. I don't know. Niger, Filani said Niger must block the Nigeria/EU pipeline from passing through their country to counter the French sabotage on their pipeline in Benin. If you are talking about that trans something pipeline, that includes also Algeria, it was, I think, Algeria, Niger, and Nigeria. That's not happening. Niger has backed out from that. But if there is already an existing one, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that is the one he's talking about, the Trans-Saharan
Niger
pipeline.
has backed out from it. Yeah. We need to isolate and restrain the traitors. Whenever African movements started taking root, traitors were the key to upset it. The West are a weak force. They use our own strengths against us. Well said. Yeah. Sherry Blair is on the board of Sherry Blair, who is married to Tony Blair, is on the board of directors of Dangote Cement. Oh, that's new. Okay. Yoruba said something else as well, some kind of revelation about that he's the World Bank and something. Let me find that comment. Dangote, here it is. Dangote is a member of the Clinton Global Initiative and the World Economic Forum. So does that mean what? That will save him or what? You want to come in on this one?
Yeah, I think that Yoruba Land asked also another question, that what do we take Dangote's narrative as truth, as the whole truth? So I think that people do not always have one position. It's like people are not always defined by one narrative. I think it is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie who said the danger of a single story. Mm-hmm. Okay, like what she means by the danger of a single story is to define one person in only one direction. So Dangote has a story that he's related to these people like Tony Blair, Bill Clinton. Because Bill Clinton, I think, I mean, and other people like what is his name, the richest man, Bill Gates, right? Even Bill Gates came to the marriage of his daughter, of Dangote's daughter, in Nigeria. You know, he has a relationship with them as the most powerful people in the world, as the richest people in the world. But this does not take away the fact that he's also an African. All right. That does not, the fact that he has a relationship with these people as rich people like Bill Gates, and of course these people, they also have their schemes which are detrimental to Africa. That does not take away the fact that Dangote is an African and has interest in building Africa. So that is what I want Yoruba land to understand. So yes, it does not take away the fact that Dangote made all his money in Africa, and he may have interest in seeing Africa advance and talk about the advancement and industrialization of Africa. And actually, there's no single investor or a group or a country who has invested in Africa as Dangote. There's no one investor like this, whether it is a country like the United States or Europe all combined, who has ever invested in Africa like Dangote. Like, who has ever invested like 19 billion in one project as Dangote? There's no one, nowhere, ever. So Dangote is the single biggest investor on the African continent.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's the danger of a single story, and that's why I also asked now what made him. It made him like he's ready to reveal this thing. But even if you put them on the board or you are part of this and that, now look at President William Ruto. I mean, right now as we speak, the foreigners are crowded at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to leave the country. They are not saving him. They are running away. And now sooner or later you will read on their embassies, Kenya becoming, the red spot or the orange spot, whatever they call it, like it will become a dangerous zone to go, and they will label you from east to west. But this is a man that has been groomed all by the West, so they will not save you. So he knows all these kinds of things, but still he chose to reveal so that people know. Filani, you have commented Cameroon might give Niger passage problems because of Paul Biya's French connection. If you are talking about the pipeline, that is now when Niger considers rerouting it through Chad. Cameroon is not an immediate neighbor to Niger, so it has to pass through Chad. And so the idea is actually then to reach to the Cameroon, the Kibri or something port. Yeah. So that is the idea. In fact, it's cheaper. I don't know why they haven't done it before. If there's no other question, that was it for us. African people, we missed leader of 1963. Yeah, we are still stuck there. That was it. Yeah. Yeah, somebody said it was the Juma. Some former retired military officers are part of these cartels.
Yeah, so internally, even internally, there's some people internally, and that is mostly politicians and the middle class people. And that is what I say, that Nkrumah points out the problems in the continent, that you have the external forces, which are the neo-colonial forces who want to subjugate and colonize Africa again. And then you have the collaborators internally, who are majorly the middle class, right? You have the middle class people who have some small money, some of them who work with these international oil corporations and international corporations monopolies. And then you have some of the politicians who are maintained, to be the leaders of these countries, to be the heads of these countries by the money which comes from the international corporations. So this is the challenge for the revolutionaries. So Nkrumah, what he's trying to point out is that you have to take care of these. You have to know how to deal with these problems if you want to unify Africa, you want to liberate Africa and rebuild it. These are the forces. He's pointing them out to you. And then giving you the tools which you use, and those tools, of course, are provided in the book Philosophical Concisism, the Philosophy of Decolonization. Nkrumah wrote one book where he gives you the tools of how to understand how to deal with these forces so that you can be able to liberate Africa and then unify it for reconstruction.
Thank you very much, Kwame. We would love to sit here and talk with you, answer your questions, reflect on your, learn from you as well. But again, when it is more longer, also we want really people, not only on the live stream, to be able to click at it. When it's longer video, people really don't dare to click and watch, but it's a really important thing. We bring knowledge, we prepare ourselves. It's not a click and bait. We really prepare ourselves to come here and share with you what we know, and equally take your comments and questions from you as well. So thank you all for being here, for trusting us, for engaging, for giving us your time. We really appreciate it. We don't take it for granted. Thank you at Greta and Black for reminding the people to subscribe, like, and share. That's really important. Please subscribe to the channel. If you find it relevant and informative, then give it thumbs up, okay? And share the video with others. Do not keep the knowledge and information to yourself. That's not good, okay? So share it to your network. And if you want to help us further, which will be really good for us to be here more often, you can donate to our PayPal account. You can find it in the description section. So as we always do, we like to interact with the people: WS Banker, Greta Woodson, Fred Bantu, Dejuma, Filani Sikiwili, Black, who else? MRV.
And Mahlet, don't forget to appreciate Nigerian Prince, who donated. I think he gave us a super chat, $5 there. And
Thank
also,
you. Okay.
yes, and also Osman Koni. Osman Koni also gave us a super chat, $10 there. So you guys also appreciate them, and everyone who is on the platform. Filani, Sikwili, we see them there. Akan Fire, a lot of people. Rafa, Congoman, Rafaya Congoman, WS Banker, Yoruba Land, everyone who commented. Greta Woodson, I think she's in the United States. Everyone. So we just appreciate everyone who has been on the channel, who's supporting
Mohammed
the channel.
Musa Ali, who he was first even before us. Thank you all, really. And we like.
Yes, the Juma Boutique. The Juma Boutique. There's another one called the Juma Boutique, Freddie Bantu. All those ones you have mentioned them. So we appreciate you guys all. We ask you to be present whenever we are here. Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays. But there is times when things are hot and we come here and we talk about more things. Like yesterday, we are not supposed to be here, but we came and we talked about things. So there's some things hot topics which come up, but the typical days, the well-known days are Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Those are the days which you should not miss. You should not miss. So we thank you very much, and back to you, Mahlet.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you again. And we will see you on the next one. And have a blessed weekend. And suggest, if there is anything, suggest it. Write us an email, suggest it in the comment section. Also, the topic suggestion can come from you. And it's a ciao. Thank you, Kwame, once again. And we love you. Bye-bye.